Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Tanvir.
Walaikum
Thank you for your
salam
time
wa
today.
rahmatullah.
Really appreciate it. Now, as a short introduction, and I'm hoping you can expand on this for me a little bit, is you're a community builder through sustainable and responsible finance. What does that mean? Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm not sort of a traditional finance guy who worked my way up through a bank or an investment institution. I came into financial services through really grassroots community involvement. For me, the first thing was working with coconut sugar farmers in Indonesia, and as I've gone through my career in various other roles, coming to where I'm at today is I'm really interested in how financial services can be designed responsibly with people in mind and planet, of course, and do so in a way that empowers communities. So not sort of extracting value from one to give it to another, but can we design a better system, a fairer system, and at the same time help address segments of the community, whether they be Muslims, particularly because we're looking for Sharia compliant financial services, but also segments of the community that need capital, like small and medium businesses, which is the focus of my current investment fund. So in a sense, it's really building community, which is what finance should be. It's not about extraction. It's about holistic empowerment.
So then how did it all start? What's that origin story? How did you get into it?
It was sort of very, subhanAllah, unplanned. I did not study finance at uni. I didn't even do accounting subjects. I did economics and law, so mainly in the humanities space. I always wanted to work in NGOs and work on impactful organizations that were out there trying to help people who are the needy and the forgotten. But it was a couple of years ago. I initially worked in consulting for a couple of years, but I had the opportunity to live in Indonesia, working for the President Clinton Foundation. And the role was to try and build sustainable businesses that could link farmers with markets. And we had a partnership with Unilever. But it was whilst working in that role that I came to realize that a little bit of capital could free these farmers from the debt traps that they were in. Because the reality of the majority of the world's agricultural commodities and the value chain of how the commodities go from production at a farm level finally to our plates when we consume it is that these smallholders are paying to are selling to traders, and the traders are providing them with some upfront capital. They need it for fertilizers, pesticides. They often need to take extra personal loans to send their kids to school or buy medicine and get food. And they pay that trader off at the end. So it's that realization that we could free these farmers from the debt traps that they were in, because they really were. They were getting extorted. So that was one realization. The second realization was that majority of the world's commodities are supplied by these small and medium businesses. And so the aha moment for me was, oh, if I can try and play a role here and move capital around, then I can do something impactful. And it was a bit of an alternative to my very first job whilst I was finishing uni, which was working at Muslim Aid Australia as a charity. And obviously, charities have an important role to play in society, but that was also a form of, let's take some capital funds from people who want to donate and give it to people who need them. But whilst we need that, particularly in emergencies, we have zakat and so forth, it's not a very sustainable and scalable solution to solve the world's problems, whether it be poverty or climate change. So it started me thinking about what can I do? And so that was kicking off and sort of steered me in a whole new direction into the world of finance and learning more about how to utilize it.
Right. How does one go from studying economics and law into finance? What's that? What was that journey for you? How did that happen?
It was a very indirect journey. So obviously I didn't kind of go apply for grad jobs in finance or start at a bank. I was fortunate to get accepted to a fellowship program at the Islamic Development Bank. And the criteria to get into that was having some sort of a commercial background and where my consulting and work at the foundation was relevant, and having some qualifications or experience working in with postgraduate studies. And I did that with my economics honors degree. But I was probably the odd one out in the whole cohort. Everyone had worked at a bank or a financial institution or had at least studied finance, and I did not fit the mold. And that for me has pretty much been my theme through all my finance career. Sort of, I'm this odd guy trying to do something different. And sometimes I think of it as, we need to have an outside perspective. And I'm sort of that outside perspective. Why do we only need to do it this way? Why do we only need to invest into these assets like stock market and property, which everyone keeps talking about? Can we do something different? So I think the message there is to just, don't let what seems to be the barrier up front in the job description or in the application process be the thing that limits you, because sometimes people are interested in outside in perspectives. And I mean, if you look at one of the world's most influential financial institution, the World Bank, their director was an ex-doctor. He was not a finance guy, and he picked it up. So I think nowadays it is a lot easier to have transferable skills in other industries. And alhamdulillah, I was able to pick it up. I'm not claiming that, and I by no means am I a finance guru. There's, there's no way you can get tons and years of experience over someone who might be working at a big financial institution. But it's enough to kind of understand that and then kind of build off that. So yes, alhamdulillah, so that opportunity is what opened up for me. And I've obviously got to supplement it with further learning. And so the benefit of that program was they also sponsored us to do a Master of Islamic Finance, which included conventional finance subjects and Islamic finance. That's where I kind of cut my teeth with some more concrete knowledge and also the work experience.
Right. So in terms of the work experience, you've worked at quite a fair few places, one of them being McKinsey. How did you get into that, or and what stage of life was
SubhanAllah, that itself is a very interesting story, because I actually had no idea I didn't know the name McKinsey. I didn't know what management consulting was until sort of towards the end of my undergrad degree. And the way I came across McKinsey was in third year of uni, I took a semester abroad. So it's different to an exchange where someone else is coming from the other university. So this is where I applied to a university in another country. In this case, I went to Bangladesh and I applied to study there. And then later on, I'll take the risk and have to hope that my home university will accept the credits. So I went and studied at BRAC University, which is founded by one of the world's largest NGOs. And Bangladesh is one of its major exports through that service. And whilst I was about to start the semester, I was asked by a local NGO that I'd volunteered at the previous year, which is called the Hunger Project. And they said, look, there's a group of Australian social investors coming. Would you like to come on this trip? And you can also play a role in being a bit of an interpreter. So I said, sure. And I went there, and literally half the group were people who were management consultants.
Oh, wow.
Among them was the former managing partner of McKinsey Australia, Michael Rennie, who himself is quite an inspirational person, and he tries to give back. So he was on the board of Hunger Project Australia. So I met him there, and I got to see all the other consultants. I ended up asking one of them, which is from a more niche boutique consulting firm called Nous, if we could do an internship. They were very kind to give me an opportunity to do that the following year. This is early 2010. And then a couple of years later, I remembered Michael Rennie and McKinsey. It was during another semester abroad whilst I was at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And there I went to a conference about social enterprises, and a lot of those people were ex-consultants. And I started thinking, if I want to go and have an impact, I want to be like these guys, because they're ex-consultants. Some of them were ex-investment banking, and they were now applying those skills and knowledge to try and solve social and environmental problems. And that's when I thought to reach out to Michael and say, hey, what do you think about consulting? Is it going to be a good opportunity? And he was very encouraging. He put me in touch with the recruiter to start going through the application process. And that was how I got into it. I didn't even know that there was university recruitment programs and there was a cycle. I had no idea. So that's it. I just jumped into it, had a go. And then I had to kind of do a crash course on case management and all of that kind of stuff. But alhamdulillah, that was through that volunteering experience. If I hadn't volunteered, I wouldn't have come across McKinsey in the first place. I wouldn't have done that internship. But yeah, so I often tell people that, you don't need to try and over-engineer where you want to end up. Sometimes just by having a go, sometimes giving back, volunteering and contributing to the community is some of the best ways you can learn. And for me, that's what's paid so much, alhamdulillah. My first job was at Muslim Aid. I did a lot of volunteering with NGOs. Even when I started my finance career, I was working literally for an NGO that was trying to create some innovation. And that opened up so many other doors for me, alhamdulillah. Yeah.
So now you're at a stage where you're at McKinsey.
Yeah.
What happens after that? Where did you go after that?
Yeah. So I did my 2 years. It's as they say, you do your time. You work your 80 hours on a plane pretty much every week. But it was an intense period. I also actually started my PhD while I was at McKinsey, which in hindsight, maybe isn't the wisest decision, but it definitely
It's-
kept me very busy. Those 2 years
imagine,
went by
yeah.
quickly. But yeah, so I did the 2 years, but I was looking for, I really wanted to move abroad and do some international impact work. A lot of the projects I was at McKinsey was during the heyday of mining. So either I was in a coal mining site somewhere, or I'm working on a transformation for a gold miner. So and that was that gig in Indonesia. So working with the foundation, I got a
Right,
role
right,
there.
okay.
So I moved to Indonesia, did that for a year, and then I got accepted into the fellowship at the Islamic Development Bank, and so
Right,
that's
and
when I
then
moved to
that's
Saudi Arabia. Yeah, so that was my couple of years abroad between 2016 and 2018.
wow.
Yeah.
So how long did you spend in Saudi then?
I spent 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah.
What was your experience there?
Oh, subhanAllah, it was phenomenal. It was really phenomenal in a number of dimensions. One was, I mean, we just talked about, it was my first real foray into finance. So I worked through the fellowship program had 2 rotations in 2 different departments, as well as doing the Master of Islamic Finance, which was they sponsored. So alhamdulillah, that was a great opportunity. And so learning real at the front of it, like doing investment banking deals, doing asset management. And not having that background in finance, I was like literally trying to learn what all these terms mean and talking to my colleagues like, what is that?
Trying to get tips.
So that was at steep learning curve. In addition to that, it was actually I guess it was to be honest, it was quite challenging as well, because I was away from my friends and family, and I found that Saudi Arabia at the time, it's really different now if anyone's gone there. It was far more conservative. I mean, to talk about some very simple things, there were like no movies to go out to. Even if you went to the bowling alley, they were classified as family activities. And so single men were just not allowed. So generally single males, they're treated as being a bit of a scum of the society. So they have the least liberties to enjoy social experiences. And so I kind of found that a bit uncomfortable. The other thing I found uncomfortable was the work culture was really different. At McKinsey, we were very much a horizontal structure. Even the
Right.
partner, you could go up to the partner and give them feedback. And here I was in a very bureaucratic, almost government-like organization with people from many other cultures who don't like a new kid from Australia telling them anything. Just shut up and do your work. Don't wander around. Don't try and add value to another department or another project. So that I found that really challenging. And look, it got to the point where people, like, I basically made some enemies internally where they didn't kind of like my style or like who I was, and they really didn't want me to be there. So that was an opportunity to, I guess, then connect spiritually. I wasn't able to stay on to the end of that program, and I had to kind of make a decision to come back. And it was leading up to that time, I basically just spent a lot of time in Medina and Mecca, particularly Medina. I mean, it was, despite that work challenge, I think nothing compares to being able to spend some time in Saudi Arabia. And I actually encourage a lot of people that if you're looking to get some different experiences to your career, think about going to that region because it's actually bustling. There's a lot happening, and career-wise, professionally, it's probably worth your while. But also, you won't always get that opportunity where you're having a conversation with your colleagues on a Thursday because the weekend's Friday and Saturday, and you're like, "What's your plans for the weekend?" It's like, "Oh, not sure. Maybe I'll catch a bus to Medina tonight, or I'm just gonna go smash out an Umrah before Jummah." Like things like that. So no, it was definitely very 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 opportune to be able to do that, and that was a blessing, alhamdulillah. But it's also an appreciation of the fact that change is hard, it's challenging. It kind of was a bit of a deja vu moment for me going back to my time as Muslim Aid, where I saw that internally our institutions, it takes time to make those changes, and there's a lot of politics and culture that affect those institutions. It's probably why I at the end of that I concluded that I have a lot of learning to do and I needed to be more humble. Perhaps I came in a little bit arrogant, but also I realized that for me, I'm probably not the best fit to try and make change in large organizations. I probably work better in smaller organizations. So at the end of that, I really concluded that I didn't want to work in large organizations. I wanted to go for smaller, and that's where startups was a whole new thing for me when I came back to Australia.
So then now you've come back to Australia. How did you get back into the workforce? What did you sort of
Yeah,
engage
so
with?
I didn't have any full-time roles, but subhanAllah, like working at McKinsey gave me enough of a foundation to be able to do freelance strategy consulting work. And I didn't notice at the time, but it was towards my end of time in Saudi where I came across the fact that ex-consultants were in high demand. And they basically could do freelance gigs from a couple of weeks to a couple of months even.
Right.
I knew a recruiter who recruited exclusively from management consulting to put them into industry roles. They advertised some roles at Coles in Melbourne. And I applied, and subhanAllah, like I was able to get accepted as one of the consultants in their team because they're doing a massive transformation. And yeah, so I made my way to Melbourne and spent 5 months there working on strategy projects for Coles. And it was towards that time I was thinking about what I wanted to do, and it was a bit of a funny thing because I'd been out of Australia for a couple of years. And I saw a lot of really exciting things because, I mean, the Middle East was booming for sure. It was that transition period in Saudi. Dubai obviously was a few years ahead. I even spent some time in Turkey and saw some of the startup scene there. And I'd spent some time in Southeast Asia, which is really booming as well. So Australia felt like a bit of a desert. It was like behind. And I was like, okay, where do I want to play in this space? I mean, it's come a long way in the last 5 years. But I kind of narrowed myself to thinking, okay, I want to work in a startup because I want to work in a small, agile organization. I want to work related to tech because things are moving faster in the tech world or tech-enabled world. And I want to apply finance for an impactful purpose. I didn't just want to work for a bank, or I just don't want to work for something like just solving, just another financial cog. I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And subhanAllah, I was talking to a friend who works in finance, and I was telling him about, look, this is kind of what I'm interested in looking at. All these recruiters that I speak to, all they do is provide me with opportunities for strategy roles at a big four bank. And I'm like, don't know if I really want to do that. Yeah. And he knew a recruiter in financial services, and he had seen that she was recruiting for a particular role. And he flicked it over to me, and I was like, I read it, and I went to speak to the recruiter. I was like, subhanAllah, this is it. Like, if I can get into this role, this would be amazing. And it was working at a startup called Bright, which had just launched a few years earlier. And they were essentially providing, subhanAllah, they were providing a murabaha type finance product. For those who aren't familiar with murabaha, it's one of the majority of scholars agree that it's one of the Sharia compliant ways that you can provide upfront finance or credit for someone to purchase something that they cannot afford today and pay it off over time without having into the interest, because you basically trading a product and selling it at a markup. And then that markup and the original product price, whoever is borrowing, they pay over time. And Bright was doing that, and they had a no interest product. Because Bright would provide the financing to the vendor, and they would make a margin on what the vendor sold the product to the final residential customer, who was able to then pay it over time and without having an interest. And you couldn't charge any interest because literally the contract was a sale contract. It was brilliant. So I was able to do that. I was like, I studied Islamic finance, and now I'm able to work in the industry. And so that was a great opportunity, alhamdulillah. Like, it really aligned. And I remember it was really interesting. And, having tawakkul is such a big thing, right? And you never really, I guess, understand it when, I guess, two things. Either you're in the real doldrums and you're just like, I can't really see an opening anywhere. And you're like, I have to focus. And, our tradition talks about there are certain times where you need to have that extra bit of tawakkul. And it's like you're stretching yourself. The other thing is when something lines up and you're like, I could not have designed this better. So it was that moment for me, because I was actually, the role at Coles, it was actually cut short. So I was meant to do 3 months. My manager said, can you stay on for another 3 months? We like what you're doing. And the project, there's some more things we need to do, and we don't want to go back and recruit more people. Is it okay? We can stay longer. So I was going to stay for another 3 months, but they cut me short at 5 months. And the reason was that, as you do in strategy, you sometimes design your own exit. So there's some labor rationalization that was happening. In other words, working out whether consultants should really be there in a particular department or not. And it would be unpalatable for the strategy team to proselytize other departments to cut off consultants, and they had their own consultants internally. But I remember feeling a little bit disappointed. I was like, like, I've been cut short. I haven't really landed my next role. And I remember one of my friends from school, and you always have these friends who sometimes they come out of the woodworks and they give you that little bit of a, saying, hey, wake up, So he said to me, subhanAllah, you got made redundant in Ramadan. You don't have a job. Like, isn't this the best time for you to make the most of Ramadan? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, I could stop feeling sorry for myself. And I'm like, what's in front of me right now? Like, I have Ramadan. Like, I literally have something in front of me, and it would be a shame for me not to take advantage of what Allah's opened up.
Definitely.
And so I actually made the intention to go back to Bangladesh and spend the last 10 days there with some family. And there's a scholar there that's close to our family. I spent some time with him. And I sent off my CV because that recruiter had notified it. And they said, look, come back, and if we're happy, we'll have an interview when you come back. And I came back and I got the interview, and then subhanAllah, a couple of weeks later, I was able to get that role. And again, like, it was, I the interview, they asked me some very, like, a technical finance question, because they're like trying to test out whether I'm right for the role. The job description actually said you need to have a chartered accountant or a CPA, and I didn't have that. But like the manager liked me and said, okay, you can pick up the pieces. You've got the background. We'll be fine. And that was it. That was my foray into startups and working in an adaptation of an Islamic finance product with a sustainable goal. So it kind of ticked all the boxes, alhamdulillah.
And so that worked out really nicely for you. So the theme that I'm seeing here is you have a certain path that you want to take, but Allah is taking you through a different path.
Yeah.
And it's not a path that you designed or fashioned yourself, but Allah keeps bringing you down to this way. It's like,
I mean, I really thought I'd spend my career working in NGOs or charities. I would have said that for majority of my high school. That or teaching. I also enjoyed teaching a lot, and my mum is a teacher, my aunt's a teacher. I was surrounded by teachers, so I really thought that was how I wanted to have impact. I mean, for me, the vision was clear. I wanted to use my time and resources to make a difference in the world. In however I could do it. And I had like a vague picture about it but what exact angle I'd go through and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala direct me, no idea. If you asked me today, I'd be working and setting up a financial service fund. No idea. Like, I mean, I didn't even study that. I didn't even think, it wasn't even the top 5. You know, when you select where you want to study at the end of finance was nowhere near the top. I mean, I had a lot of other friends working in finance and studying finance. I had no interest in finance.
SubhanAllah, it's amazing how Allah guides you through those, paths, and and now you're here. So you've now started working at this startup. You've spent some time. I know you then went and co-founded another startup.
Yeah.
What was that? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So I was at Bright for a couple of years, about 2.5 years. And I got married end of 2019, alhamdulillah. And at that point I was like, okay, I've been, working full time. I was, and also still trying to finish my PhD. Because remember, I started that in 2013. So I'm already 6 years in and it's nowhere near finished. I managed to do my field work as part of the empirical research in 2019, just before I got married. But now I've got the results from my research, but my thesis isn't written. And I'm like, I'm married now. I've got to start thinking about my wife and sort of building that future. I got to finish the PhD. And I thought, look, doing it part-time is just not going to cut it. Like, it's too inefficient. Because I read an article today and then I'll forget it in a week. And I'm not writing as effectively as I could. So I decided in 2021 to take a sabbatical from Bright to finish the PhD. So I thought, okay, if I go full time, I won't have work and, I'll be kind of technically unemployed that year, but at least I'll be able to just focus and get it done. And anyone who knows me, my wife's probably kind of bearing the brunt of that. Is like, I get distracted really easily and I get impatient. I made some good progress in the first couple of months, but I was already itching to do something else. Like, I can't just sit and do reading articles and writing up things on a word processor. So 2 things happened. One was I was remembering the conversations from a lot of people, my friends and family particularly, where they were asking, Tanvir, how do I invest in a halal way? That was a common problem that a lot of people brought to me. And particularly they said, oh, you just come back from working in Islamic finance, you've done your master's in Islamic finance, so maybe you have some answers, maybe you have some perspective. And it's incredible. Like, a lot of people really care about that stuff. regardless of where they might be on the spiritual dimension, I think people intuitively feel that our deen tries to do the right thing by people and by society. And I think that really resonates.
Yeah.
So those sort of questions emerged between 2018 and 2021. But I didn't feel comfortable that I had a clear answer in Australia where people could go into.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I'm not a financial planner, so I really can't give anyone advice. And even if I had the licensing, I don't feel confident enough.
Yeah.
So I actually spent between 2018 and 2021 looking through the contacts I had when I lived in Southeast Asia and Middle East. Because remember, I was saying that those places were booming. There was a lot of startups that were trying to solve these problems, trying to bring financial service solutions in a Sharia compliant manner for the masses.
Yes.
And I knew about platforms that were providing crowdfunding solutions. I knew new platforms providing halal investment options. And I started testing with my own money. And I got my wife into it at some point. And so I started testing them out, learning about how they work, obviously studying some of that as well, because my PhD was about Islamic microfinance. And so I thought, okay, why don't I've taken a year off work. On the side, I'll try and put together a bit of a plan. As in an initial, let's say, experiment. So I created a deck, and as a consultant, you learn how to make PowerPoint decks all the time. And literally, it was a Sunday. I remember this. We weren't doing much. My wife was I was like, hey, I'm just going to spend a couple of hours putting a deck together, just putting an idea. And I shared it with a couple of friends and put a bit of an audio note. And I said, hey guys, look, I'm trying to put together an investment strategy to test this out. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Do you guys want to participate? Let's invest together. And I that first fund we raised about $25,000. And I started investing that. And so I thought, look, leave the money with me for about 6 months to try and do it with a small group of my friends, and we'll see what the results are. So that was one thing I was doing. And then towards the end of the year, I came across this new company called Viro, and a friend of mine. So I saw the company and the role. They were recruiting for a chief operating officer, and they'd just come out of Antler, which is an accelerator for startups. And I knew one of my colleagues from Bright who'd left earlier, who was also part of that same cohort, and we connected up. And I said, okay, look, this is interesting. I should check it out to learn more. And subhanAllah, I was initially contacting them for a role opportunity, learning more about that. What happened was one of their founders, he exited. Like he didn't want to continue on and be a founder. I mean, like realizing the stress and challenges, and had some other things going in his personal life. And so suddenly I'm in a weird situation where the other founder that was left needed more co-founders to make this viable to go to the investment committee. So myself and the lady that was hired, we became the co-founders.
Wow.
And I'm like, wait, what's happening here? I'm suddenly a co-founder of a venture capital backed tech startup.
Yeah.
And it was in electric vehicles. Why I was interesting to those founders was because they were trying to create a 0% interest car finance facility to sell cars.
You had the experience.
And I had the Murabha learning back in my doing a master's. I worked at Bright doing that product, and they're like, we need someone to help us do this product. SubhanAllah, like now I'm literally applying the learnings and trying to create a new product. And it was the first product of its time.
Yeah.
Because 0% financing was growing in Australia. You had Afterpay booming, you had Zip, Bright was doing it for solar PVs, and now we were trying to do it with electric cars.
Yeah.
And here I was trying to do that, and that's kind of what got me into that, and subhanAllah, like to be able to be a co-founder.
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you co-founded that, and then you exited that company. And while you were working on that little project with your friends and family, that then became
that just kept blossoming in different ways. So the first fund paid out. I think our return was above 15%. Then I said, okay, well, this seems to be working. Do you guys want to do it again? Maybe I can try and ask a few other people. So then the next one was a $106,000 fund, investing into primarily what became the wholesome strategy, which is small and medium businesses and microfinance as well. So that was fun too. And that was going to go, I said, this time let's go a bit longer, because if we can do it a bit longer, it allows us to maximize the yield opportunity, the return opportunity. So I launched the second one. We did a third one, fourth one, alhamdulillah. Then over 2021 to 2023, ran invested in total about almost $860,000.
Mashallah.
And the returns were phenomenal, alhamdulillah. And it was genuinely a new product. We weren't kind of just investing into the stock market or just doing property. Like we were genuinely trying to find a way to allocate capital here into small and medium businesses globally in a Sharia compliant, using Sharia compliant financing mechanisms, and generating good returns for people.
Wow.
So that for me was, I guess, validation that, okay,
This can work.
this could work, and
Yeah.
maybe this is what I should do. I think one thing I should backtrack is in 2021, when I was on that sabbatical, I was mentally kind of thinking, I'll start this whole Islamic finance investing kind of idea. And 2021, it didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
I actually joined an accelerator at the time, and obviously I started those experiments. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I guess, then pushed me in a different direction, and I went to work at that electric vehicle startup. But in hindsight, it was the best thing because it gave me some more time to validate the idea for Wholesome further. But at the same time, I went through the rigor of learning how to build a startup, how to deal with growing a new business, getting it set up, working with partners, working with the team, hiring staff, all those things that are absolutely crucial to starting a business. Like an idea for a business is just one thing, but honestly, 99% of it is the execution. And you need to learn that. And I was almost in a weird way going through that learning experience, and it was a good learning experience for sure, and I was very grateful for that opportunity. Viro started off doing the car financing. We realized that it was going to be a bit difficult to scale, and we had the challenge that the interest rate environment had changed. And because what happens is, whilst we don't charge interest to the client, we need to pay a fee to the vendor or to the financier who's participating. Because in that transaction, they're providing the finance, we're paying them, so they're making that margin and then selling it to the customer. So the customer's fine, but we need to fork out a bigger margin to make the financier interested. And that just wasn't going to be a viable business model. And then the company started veering more towards providing software marketplace solutions. And for me, in the finance part, I wasn't being utilized as much. So then I said, okay, well, I've gotten that experience. The community still needs a result. Initially when I came back in 2018, people asking the questions. By 2023, these solutions still hadn't evolved. There was a couple of new Islamic fintechs coming to this place, both here and globally, but no one was really focusing on solving how do we help people invest smaller amounts of money, do it in a way that's short-term and provides a regular income so that they don't need to face the volatility of the stock market and they don't need large amounts of money that they put out for a very long time with property investing. This is what Wholesome was about, and this is kind of like, it is unsolved. So I was fortunate enough, alhamdulillah, that a lot of my initial clients and family and friends who I supported in those trial funds, they said, we'll come and back you to set up this new business. And so they became my angel investors in the first pre-seed round.
So now Wholesome is up and running. It's a fully functioning startup.
We hadn't launched by then. So I raised the pre-seed in March, April, and then I was wrapping up at Viro. And then in July I started full time, and it took us about 6 months to get the foundation of the company, including our licensing and legal side of things, which is very important for financial services.
And now it's fully functional.
In January launched, alhamdulillah. So it's fully functional. So it's been about almost 5 months now of operations. And we've got clients coming in. Amazing. We're about to pay out our first distributions, inshallah, in about a month's time.
Amazing.
So alhamdulillah, it's now out there.
and so how much, what's if you can share, what's the total fund amount that you're looking after now?
At the moment, we're just about 1.4 million.
Nice.
Mashallah.
So one of the things that I want to sort of go back a little bit is, what is halal investing? What does that mean?
Look, it's a really good question. And so there's the technical side of halal, which is it's a legal concept. Halal, haram. The scholars identify what's permissible and the levels of permissibility and so forth. So, in terms of taking what the Quran and the Sunnah through the Hadith say about what is permissible and what is not permissible, And it's the halal investing is the process of taking those laws and principles and applying them to the modern world that we live in, with all the complex financial systems, products, transactions, ways of doing, for money and to move around, and trying to create frameworks for how to provide money to people to generate a return back to the investor.
Right.
And obviously investing, like if before we go into halal, if we look at investing is someone is putting their money that is legally theirs, putting that towards another company, project, person, with the objective that that money is going to be utilized for a productive economic purpose, and then it's going to generate a profit that can be paid back. But with the person who is doing the investment accepts that they know there's risk, that they may lose their money, but they will be compensated for that risk through the return. And if there is no risk, then there is no return.
That's right.
Even when you put your money in the bank, people think, oh, that's safe. Well, the government only guarantees up to $250,000 in Australia for your deposit. And that's what taxpayers will fund if a bank collapses. But every other type of investing will have risk. So halal investing is, how do I do that? Like, I want to put my money that's surplus. I don't need it today, or I don't want it with me. I want to give it to someone. How do I do that in a way that avoids the major prohibitions? And the major prohibitions well, the two biggest ones are really riba and gharar. Riba is often translated as interest, but riba actually means much more than just interest, which is it includes unlawful gains. So if you're trying to rip someone off, you mislead them, that could potentially fall under ribawi transactions. And gharar is really, it's again a very complex and deep concept, relating to uncertainty that is unreasonable, excessive risk, like, gambling would include, gambling is also forbidden, but it also transactions that involve such a high level of speculation that it's almost like gambling. The common example is like, you can't sell to someone saying that, oh, I'm going to sell you the fish I catch. You haven't caught it yet.
Caught the fish yet.
So these are the two concepts that every transaction to avoid. So that halal is essentially, majority is, I want to avoid the haram, and I want to get transactions that are compliant. And so scholars come up with that. And so, scholars have been grappling with these questions for a while. And as a result, because the modern world is so different to how business was done in an age where there's barter, in an age where people are trading just real stuff, we get a diversity of opinions. So I won't get into the technicalities of that, but there are some differences between regions, between scholars, and what is permitted or not. But essentially, you cannot give money for money. Like, I cannot give you $100, you're going to pay me $110. You've got to involve trade, lease, some sort of value add. It's got to be based on assets, so we clear contracts. So a lot of the wisdom of Islamic law, beyond just finance, applies. You can't exploit people, can't mislead people. So for me, though, halal investing, and this is why I felt uncomfortable when I went back to 2018 of just saying, invest in this product. Because for me, coming back, and remember, I come from the background of I wanted to be involved in trying to do good in the world.
Of course.
You can do a halal investment transaction that's technically compliant that causes harm. Like, for example, let's say you're going to invest into a company that engages in heavy pollution. Technically, it'll comply. It's halal. It even might have
halal.
It's fine, and it might even be meeting environmental standards of the country. But then you go, do I want my money to go to that company? Because yes, it can be halal, but if I'm investing in that company, what it means is I'm not giving my money to someone else that might be more deserving.
Right.
And also, that company might be causing downstream impacts. Let's say it's polluting a river that affects a fishing village downstream. So for me, halal is just going beyond just, I want to avoid the haram, which is, I think a lot of people I came across, like, I just want to avoid the haram, which is fine and important. Look, we need to do that. But I think Islam is all about empowerment. And for me, this is what I learned the most from that journey. Because remember, my first journey in finance was trying to work out, how do we use finance to help that farmer? Right? It's about help. It's about trying to make a change. This is why I don't call my fund a halal fund. I called it wholesome. And the name wholesome comes from the fact that in the Quran it talks about halal and tayyib. We want to go beyond just halal. We don't want to walk around saying, yes, I'm doing this because the Sharia says to do this, and I'm not doing this. but I want to walk around living that prophetic quality of being of benefit to mankind. And so for me and for us at Wholesome, halal investing is table stakes. Like we can't even have a conversation if it's not halal.
It's not like
We
that.
need to go beyond that.
Yeah.
We need to think about, can our investments do more good in the world? And so there is many concepts that have been actually used in the conventional finance world: responsible finance, responsible investing, which is let's take out things that are not good, or ethical investing, let's like remove unethical practices. There's ESG investing, which is let's try and promote things that are sustainable, have good governance, good environmental credentials. And if you move along that sort of spectrum, you come to impact investing, which is we're investing because we want to generate a positive outcome
Right.
in addition to the financial outcome. And so we operate in that responsible to impact investing space. And we want to do more of just impact investing, but there's not enough deal flow. So we obviously follow, like it's got to be Sharia compliant, but it's also like we don't invest in certain industries, and we're trying to do more of the beneficial ones. So that's what we think of it as that. So it's as you can see, it's a bigger, broader conversation
100%,
beyond just saying, I just want to be halal.
Yeah. So essentially, in a nutshell, it's wholesome investing.
Yes, it.
Which is probably where the name comes from. So now that I have a clear understanding of what halal is and what you guys are doing, what if I wanted to invest in the fund? What do I need to have to invest in your fund?
Yeah, sure. So our fund is licensed in Australia under. So what we have is called a corporate authorized representative. And we work through and get our licensing through our fund trustee, which is called Boutique Capital, and they get it from Australian Securities Investments Commission. I kind of make that point first because in our community, a lot of people don't realize what licensed and regulated investing is versus others. And unfortunately, in our community, there's been a lot of scams and a lot of things that people have been exploited. So I think it's really important that you understand how the licensing scheme works. And if you're not sure, always consult a legal taxation or a financial advisor who can help you. So when someone wants to invest, they simply go through the registry portal, which is an online platform that's provided by our trustee, which is Boutique Capital. They put an application through online, and then they'll get a formal invoice to make an investment, and they transfer their funds in. At the moment, our fund falls under what's called a wholesale fund regulation, which means that an investor needs to be qualified or accredited by an accountant.
Yes. Okay.
And so they can invest through that mechanism. And once their accountant provides that, they can come in, they invest. And then we basically pool those investor funds from all the different clients that come in, and then we allocate them to our strategy. And our strategy, as I've been sort of mentioning, is to focus on small and medium businesses and microfinance. And we do that globally. We collaborate with a lot of Islamic fintechs as well, and work with great companies that are adopting Sharia compliant mechanisms. So one of our largest investments actually is not in a Muslim company. It's with a company that sources Brazil nuts from the Amazon, in the Peruvian Amazon, and they export it globally to their retail countries. Their CFO is actually Muslim, and he was telling me the story. And I've met the CEO as well. He said that the CEO was interested in ways of de-risking their financing, because they could go to Peru and take out a loan for 30-40%, because the local banks, that's kind of often what they charge. But he was really interested by the concept of profit sharing, which is such a big theme in Islamic finance. The CFO introduced the CEO, who's a British national, to a Muslim advisory company who structured what's called a sukuk. It's a profit sharing sukuk. A sukuk is often simply translated as a bond. The idea that you take money for a specific project and purpose. When that project finishes, you pay back the original principal that was invested plus the profits. And the structure of it is, when the Brazil nuts get sold in the market, let's say for $5, and if they were produced for $2.50, that profit, $5 minus $2.50, so in other words, $2.50, that profit gets shared with the investors according to a certain profit share. That is absolutely smack bang right in the spirit and law of Islamic finance. And so that's one of our largest investments, alhamdulillah. So we were fortunate to be able to participate in that, and it ticks all our boxes. It's empowering communities in the Amazon. It's a Sharia compliant structure for sure, and the returns have been pretty good. So people can go through the portal, invest in us. We invest it. We provide the monthly reports, and we calculate profits monthly. We pay out the distributions into people's bank accounts every quarter. and people can top up their investments.
Yeah.
The minimum that they have to stay in the fund is 6 months. And
Gotcha.
we would like to get that down over time. But at the moment, 6 months is sort of a sweet spot because we're investing in small and medium businesses. So it's not like I'm buying a
You need to
share
give them
and
some
I can
time.
sell it tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's going to take a bit of time for that money to make its way. But alhamdulillah, we've got deals that range from maybe 2 or 3 months up to 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
And we just do short-term financing. So we're trying to solve things like a business wants working capital because they're trying to sell stock. We're solving things like a business wants machinery and capital to be able to produce and manufacture and expand. Or they're fulfilling an invoice. They have a contract with a larger company, and they need to prepare the materials, hire the staff, and be ready to fulfill that invoice.
Yeah.
So these are sorts of examples of investments we do.
And so I'm not a wholesale investor.
Mm.
I don't have that much money.
Mm.
I got $1,000, $2,000, maybe 10. Can I invest with wholesale?
So at the moment, our minimum is $25,000.
Yeah.
Now, what people could do is perhaps consider a couple of strategies. One is to save up their money a bit in time over time and maybe use some other alternatives and then come and talk to us. Or if they go through a financial planner or an accountant, they'll be able to provide alternative mechanisms to invest through us. So we're about to list on a platform which financial advisors use, and they can control that, and because it's a B2B relationship. But I think if they consult with an accountant, they can come up with ways to either pool money together with their family and friends and use other structures to invest in us. At the moment, absolutely, we have a higher minimum to get started. But inshallah, the goal for us is if we can build a viable business in the beginning, then we can gradually expand that out to help other people. And we need to make sure that's viable. There's no point in being a fly-by-night kind of fund. So that's the thing. But in the meantime, what we do is, because we realize our investment service might be more suited to certain type of investors, we are also doing a lot of active community engagement. And this is part of probably one of the funnest parts of my role. So I've done everything from doing seminars at schools to youth at universities, as well as talking to employees at workplaces. Like, for example, I did a presentation at KPMG. And through that, what I really try and encourage people to do is there are now far more accessible Islamic finance products to invest in. Everything from Islamic ETFs or exchange traded funds, which are a basket of stocks that are compliant, and you can purchase them. You can really purchase them with even a few dollars. It's there's no limit to it. You just go through a stock brokering platform. So you've got everything from that through to institutions here in Australia that can take your money and you can invest. So we're living in a time where this is more accessible and also globally accessible. And you know, if any of your audience members want to learn more, or they can absolutely reach out, and I'm sure you'll share the contact details in the show notes. But it's important to take advantage of it. Don't be afraid. I think that's the main thing. And if you're not sure, talk to people. There's a lot more knowledge, information out there.
No, mashallah. You're doing some great work. I think it's
just trying to get started.
I definitely think it's required in the community, and inshallah, Allah gives you a lot of barakah in it, and you know we can get this off the ground, and you know it can become a big thing. One last question that I have off topic. If you were to die tomorrow, what would you like people to remember you as?
Wow. I mean, obviously thinking about death is important, right? And we don't do enough of that. So I appreciate your question. I think people, what I want people to remember me for, or remember me by, is to not let lack of knowledge, titles, backgrounds, anything that we feel as a trapping, stopping them from trying to do something meaningful with their lives, or for the people that they care about. You know, if I look at all the steps along the way, I have often not fulfilled that JD, the job description, or I have not met the criteria for a scholarship or a program. But I figured that, you know, I can give a go. The outcome is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not going to be able to control the outcome. But by me not even trying, by me not even asking the question for something that I want or something that I want to try, I've already given up. Right? And often or not, you will experience failures. But I think that this is coming back to that intention, that if your intention is to do something good, then all we can do is try. And also will look at that. And I think that is what makes, this is not just a Muslim thing. Like, any successful entrepreneur and change maker has often they have not felt adequate. In fact, they probably feel like an imposter a lot of the times. But they've gone out and said, let me see if this is possible. Or let me put that in and see what happens. And that's how change happens.
Break some rules.
And I think we as a community, and I say this to young people, and I mean, it's we don't need to feel like we're let down or that we feel that we don't have enough. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open the door for you if you put that out. So, and it can happen in so many strange and unusual ways. And I think that's the beauty of it. Let that ride go along. I would have no idea that if I did not say yes to go on that volunteer trip in Bangladesh to hang out with these social investors, I might not even be here. Right?
There you go.
So yeah, that's it. Leave it to Allah. Just enjoy the ride. And don't be afraid.
That's it. That's a wrap.
Done.